Heard a story a couple weeks ago about a man from Virginia. He finds himself at the bank of a river, everyone, and he wants to go across. He realizes it's not that deep, but it's a cold time of the year. So he realizes going across would be rather a cold endeavor, and he realizes that there's no footpath to go across. So what does he decide to do? He decides to wait for someone on a horse to give him a ride across. So he waits, and he waits, and he waits until finally here comes a group of men on horses. He looks at the first man, and he thinks, should I ask this man for a ride across the river? And he decides, no. Second man, no. Third man, no. Fourth man, no. As a matter of fact, as he looks at everyone, he says no, until he finally looks the last man in the eyes, the last man going across the river. And he asks the man, would you be willing to give me a ride across the river? And the man says, sure, jump up on him. But realize, everyone, he's cold. Okay, so he can't get up on there. The man gets off his horse, helps the man up on the horse. Not only does he give him a ride across the river, everyone, but he gives him a ride home, which is actually a few miles away. Okay, but now the rider's curiosity gets the best of him. So he asks the man, you know something? You said no to every single person who went across the river ahead of me. I'm kind of curious. Why didn't you ask him for a ride? Realize this. I was the last one. And what if I had said no? What would you have done? Man says, it's a fair enough question. Here's the answer. He said, when the group came and I looked the first man in the eye, he said, I've been around this part long enough. I think I can read him pretty well. I looked him in the eyes, and I realized he didn't care about me. I knew right away if I asked him for a ride, he would have said no. Same was true with the second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way up to you. But when I looked you in the eyes, I could see kindness, and I could see compassion. With that, everyone, they arrive to his home, gets off the horse. The rider says to him, well, I thank you for your words of kindness and compassion. I thank you for those things, that you could see that in me. He says, my prayer is this, that I never lose that being able to be kind and compassionate. But here's the kicker to the story, everyone. Here's the final phrase to it. With that, the rider, Thomas Jefferson, turned his horse around, and he headed back to the White House. Thomas Jefferson. People, when we think about acts of love, there are many ways out there. You heard today probably the most famous passage of Scripture, John 3:16. God so loved the world that he was willing to die. Thomas Jefferson. It's a story of kindness. It's a story of compassion. Thomas Jefferson, of all people. Principal author, everyone, of the Declaration of Independence, also the third president of the United States. We find Thomas Jefferson on one of our coins. Do you remember which one it is? It's the nickel. We also find him on one of our bills. Do you know which one that is? That's hard. It's actually the $2 bill. You don't see it very often, but there he is. Okay? And I want to share it with you this way, because I want to begin my homily this way, because I promised to go back to the gospel of last week. And just a quick review. Remember the gospel of last week? Jesus' zeal in the temple. There we have the money changers, we have the merchants, everyone. We have the oxen and the sheep and the doves, and what does Jesus do? He comes in there and he raises Cain, doesn't he? He really raises Cain. So let's go back to that gospel today. What I want to do with that is I just want to share a couple of thoughts on last Sunday's gospel. Here we go. For us to really appreciate that gospel, we have to understand Jerusalem, the time of the Passover, because that's when the gospel happened. Here was the story. Jews came, everyone, at Passover time from all around the world. All around the world. Thousands upon thousands of oxen, sheep, and doves were sacrificed during the Passover. Now I want you to realize this. The law said that if you were going to present an ox, a sheep, or any dove, it had to be without blemish. In other words, it had to be perfect. So let's just pretend that you are traveling a long distance, everyone, to Jerusalem. Now, you could take an animal with you to sacrifice, but here's what you realize. Number one, you had to feed it to get it there. And number two, there was a chance when you got there that your animal or dove would not have been called perfect enough for the sacrifice. So what did you most likely do? Just left your animals, you left your doves to home, and when you got to Jerusalem, you realized then you had to face the merchants. And by the way, everyone, there was only one group, and they were in the temple area. And they had the oxen, they had the doves, and they had the sheep. Now, here's the question. What do you suppose they wanted for each? Probably a pretty penny. One group. Here's the second group, the money changers. People, when you went into the temple area to buy an ox, a sheep, or a dove, you actually had to buy it with Jewish currency. Okay? Because what was believed, everyone, is the other coins, they had images on them, their inscriptions on them. They were considered adulterous. Or even idolatrous, everyone. Because we realize so many of the images and inscriptions on there, everyone, weren't about God. I'll give you a quick example. Think about the Roman coin. Remember the Roman coin? About this tax? Caesar on one side, Caesar's mom on the other side? Not good enough. Okay? But you lived in Israel. You were a Jew who lived in Israel, and for you to get by in the day-to-day life, you had to use the coin of Caesar. But now all of a sudden you get into the temple area, and what do you have to do, everyone? You have to exchange that Roman coin all of a sudden for a Jewish coin, and so now you come face to face with who? The money changers. And do you suppose, everyone, as you came face to face, you got equal value for your coin? What do you think? So do you see now what's going on? The people get blasted on two fronts. The merchants and the money changers. And let's be honest, everyone, I wouldn't say they were necessarily cheats, but they were certainly in it for the money. And now you get a better picture of Jesus coming in the temple area, hot and enraged. He makes the people scurry, not because they don't have a right to be there, which they do, not because they're not doing their job, they are, but they are there, everyone, to take advantage of people. Money. Do you remember what we talked about last week? The 10 Commandments? Do you remember what the first commandment is? I am the Lord your God. Have no strange gods before me. We talked about a lot of gods that we can worship in the world. Lust, sex, power, gluttony, food. Well, one of the big ones that we face in the world today is greed and money. We never, ever seem to have enough. You know, what does the first commandment tell us today, everyone? There's no competition. If I went around you and said, who's first in your life? The answer can only be God with a capital G, or a God with a small g. This fourth Sunday of Lent, 3 weeks, we will celebrate Easter. So I just thought at this midpoint I would ask us this question. Who is it that we worship? Who do we worship? The answer that we give to that question will determine a lot about our future and also our destiny. Who do you worship? Think about that, everyone, and God's blessings to you.